It's recycling. The United States today will support this political party if it gets fed up in the next election, pulls the funding, gives it to another political party representing another elite, and the masses are spectators. Hence the centrality of what we are talking about participatory democracy. For us, Comrade Eva, we agree with you. In our South African context, we have also emphasized the need that for participatory democracy to be successful, you need mass mobilization. Without that mass mobilization, we have an interesting situation in South Africa, some of which has caused enormous tensions within our own tripartite alliance, which now is going to be the last point that I want to touch upon. So let me move towards the end then, by very briefly highlighting some of the key organizational features and challenges of our own movement and the SACP in particular. In our case, we have a decades-old alliance that has consciously sought to forge a progressive agenda for development in our country. Our intention also is for this alliance to seek to lead other democratic forces broadly and ensure mass participation of our people. Indeed, as we will be participating here and we will be sharing this with you without hiding. As left progressive, we can't hide our real experiences from each other. We have experienced also major challenges and problems in our own alliance, at some stage verging on this alliance going towards a break. One of the key questions that we are debating currently now as the SACP is if the African National Congress is in power and the African National Congress is in alliance with the South African Communist Party and the Congress of South African Trade Unions, what is the relationship first of that ANC to state power? Maybe it's easier as the ruling party. But what should be the relationship between the SACP and state power, independent of the African National Congress, and at the same time we are allies? There's a debate that I am sure we will be able to share with you. There are quite a number of South African communists who are here, so that we are able to learn from one another. Learn from you, and we also, maybe you can learn from us. Immediately after the first democratic elections in 1994, after which Comrade Mandela was installed as our first president, the SACP adopted a strategic and programmatic slogan in 1995, the one that we were talking about, socialism is the future, build it now. We adopted this strategic perspective because we were largely informed by the fact that a number of things, that 1994 was not the end of the struggle, was a new phase that provided new opportunities, but also that a luta continua. We also had a debate inside the party in adopting this. I remember Comrade Joe Slovo saying, why do you say a luta continua after 1994? But we said, no, 1994 is only a breakthrough. And we will need then to find new ways of continuing to mobilize our people. That was also what was contained in our socialism is the future, build it now. But we also said, you cannot have a radical democratic revolution continuing post-2004 if you don't mobilize the people, the working class, and other sections of progressive forces. And therefore we said there was no contradiction between being in power and also continuing to mobilize the people, which is what we have tried to do. We had a massive strike last week, which basically shut the country down by workers led by COSATU, as part of what we are talking about, against food prices, high electricity prices, and to ensure that the working class and the mass of our people are at the head of what we are dealing with. But also we were saying socialism is the future, build it now, because we're quite convinced You are not going to consolidate a radical national democratic revolution on a terrain of capitalism without also waging simultaneously a struggle against capitalism. And introducing some socialist measures. You can see our posters here. We're demanding nationalization of our oil company, which, for instance, we produce 40% of our oil here in South Africa. Oil from coal. But it gets sold at internationally determined oil prices. Because this was a state enterprise, this Sasol, which was sold for next to nothing by F.W. de Klerk just before 1994. They are making a killing of profits now. And what are they doing? When we are calling for renationalization, they are saying now they are selling shares to black shareholders. And we have said no, we don't want SOPs. We want this institution to be in the hands of the state. It's a strategic entity. It's our oil company. But within this context, comrades, we did emphasize the centrality of the African National Congress in leading us in this particular period. But it's an ANC that we have not given it a license to rule anyhow. We have said the ANC must retain its traditions of being biased towards the workers and the poor, because that's the constituency of the African National Congress. And that we as the SACP and COSATU shall remain independent organizations. That is very critical, by the way, when we are talking about participatory democracy. You can't have participatory democracy on organizations that are simply a transmission belt of the ruling party. It can't be. Because each time before you take a decision, we have got to go to the ruling party. Would this decision be right? You must be independent. In that way, we feel, unlike some other people, that by having independent allies and independent mass organizations, you even strengthen the rule of the ruling party itself, if it is receptive to that. To end, our program as the SACP for this period moving forward is that we must build working class power in 6 key sites of power: in the state, in the economy, in the workplace, in the communities, ideologically, and through international solidarity. That's our program. That working class and organized mass power must be felt in this site of power for us, conference, and learning from each other's experiences, as Comrade Eva has said. However, it would also be very important to come up with some concrete proposals on how we deepen our solidarity and take forward common views that I am sure will emerge out of this gathering. If we don't do that, it would have just been wasted as a talk shop. Thank you very much. Amandla.
Comrade Chairperson of the session, I thank you for this opportunity, and on behalf of the Commission that was tasked to look into building women organizations and trade unions in a democratic but changing society. We must first confess that the commissioners, not by design, ended up concentrating on building women organizations and on trade unions. There is almost nothing that we do in that regard. So the presentation would really be on building a strong women organization in a democratic and changing society. So first of all, we realize that we should be very vocal and resolute in starting up projects that shall develop women both politically and economically. We also realize that we need to apply the Marxism-Leninism theory as a tool of analysis, which in itself exhaustively deals with the question of women participation in decision-making bodies and development. We also agreed that advocacy must be accompanied with implementation of the good policies that are in place in those countries to ensure that women are empowered and developed, where the laws of that land have a bias for women. Because we observed that most countries concentrate on the advocacy, and then in terms of implementation, then they would fail. So we said it should go hand in hand. We shouldn't be advocacy alone, but it should also be, there should also be the implementation. We also realized that we need to educate our children from family level to school level to religious institutions and in all the sectors of society about equality and gender. Regarding the question of quota, we agreed that numbers shouldn't be that much of a priority, but quality should be the priority. And numbers must be used within the ideological class context. And it must also be used as a tool, not as an objective. We also agreed that gender roles should not be misconstrued for sex roles. We also agreed that there is a need to train more men on care and support for the terminally ill to correct the discrepancy which sees more women being caregivers. And we also emphasized that we must avoid using money to define work for the people. And a classical example, it was that of BEE, where that was a South African experience, whereby the women that are being empowered there are the elite, and the women from the grassroots level are not benefiting from the program. And then we said we also need to commission women to avail themselves to take up leadership positions if their votership have confidence in them. And finally, we said we should avoid at all costs the question of gender contract, which sees women paying allegiance to the appointing fingers, and in the process, they fail to deliver in terms of women empowerment. And these experiences come from Venezuela, Sweden, Swaziland, Malawi, and Sudan, and South Africa. I thank you, Comrade Chairperson.
Our commission, I'm reporting on the commission on the significance of development of practice and theory of participative democracy. The commission had a robust discussion and shared experiences of the countries represented. It was noted that democracy is not supposed to be taken as a concept that is broadly understood, but that it must be located within a class context. And that to understand the operation of democracy or participative democracy, it is important that a class analysis is applied. And in applying class analysis, it will be possible to understand why there are deficits of participative democracy. We also had experiences of comrades who are privilege to be in power, and how they are tackling the issue of participative democracy. The Commission made specific recommendations to promote the practice and theory of participatory democracy. Firstly, it was agreed by the Commission and proposed to this plenary that for participatory democracy to work, there's need to recognize liberal democracy as providing democratic space through which it's possible to do a number of things. So that minimalist democracy should be at least acknowledged that it is important. But also recognizing that liberal democracy is not enough. There's need to broaden it, and there's need to engage in mass mobilization, mobilizing social movements such as trade unions and civic organizations, especially radicalizing them with a radical ideology, and this ideology I think is the leftist ideology. There's also it was also recognized that there's need for education, for continuous education. Also, it was recommended that there's need to build revolutionary organizations where opportunities arise. Well, not necessarily a prerequisite, but where opportunities arise or allow, comrades can also look at options of building revolutionary organizations, socialist or communist political parties. But that is important if it is not possible to work with existing organizations, because they are already in place, some organizations. On the question of political apathy, which was recognized in some of our countries, it was recommended that one way of addressing the issue of apathy is the involvement of the masses of people in political processes. That apathy is there partly because of the nature of the politics that we have in our countries. The politics we have is elite-based politics, where people form parties to promote their own interests. And until we involve the mass of the people in political processes, especially at local level, local level, involvement and mobilization, then apathy cannot go away. And lastly, it was also recommended that it is important to address the issue of the political alternative, that in the wake of participation, those involved in organization should also be able to articulate a credible socialist or credible left alternative which will address the limitations of the liberal ideology. I thank you.
The commission that we were in dealt with the structure and practice of people's power in socialism. The comrades agreed that what we needed to do was not only talk about the structure and practice of people's power in socialism, but to also add and say the structure and practice of people's power in socialism, but also in the struggle for socialism, because the realization that we came with was that it's only Cuba that can talk about the structure and practice of people's power in socialism. So we deliberated on both. Thus, the commission shared people in the commission shared experiences in terms of the countries that they come from. We had comrades from Kenya, Sudan, South Africa, Zambia, Lesotho. So comrades shared experiences in terms of the structures and practice of people's power in Cuba, mentioning the power that people yield in structures of governance and in ensuring that the communities at grassroots level are able to influence what happens in the structures of governance of the country, and they indeed yield that power. The countries reflected, and we dwelt on South Africa a lot. Just to indulge a bit on South Africa, not that the commission was about South Africa, of course, but what comrades shared with regards to South Africa was that the organs of people's power were strong in the past, pre-1994, and that was because all were fighting the apartheid system, which was exploitative in nature, capitalist in nature, and thus the organs of people's power would deal with all sorts of things and touch on all aspects of society, it be health issues, it be education issues, and other issues related to the economy, food production and stuff like that. But the reflection is that at present, with the new dispensation, with the current democratic dispensation, you have your ward, an example of your ward committees that comrades have seen as depoliticized in a sense, reflecting a shift in terms of the characterization of the organs of people's power that we found in the past. Some comrades didn't see it as depoliticization, but they saw it as over-politicization, English comrades, over-politicization of a capitalist ideology, which is problematic in nature. Therefore, in terms of future recommendations that the commission is bringing to this forum is that there's a need to ensure that the organs of people's power, the structures of people's power are rooted in the people. They deal with the things that touch the people, and they should not be narrow. Comrades made an example about a recent decision that was taken in the Polokwane conference, whereby there was talk about the revival of street committees. But what was stressed was that building organs of people's power should not be narrow, but they should be able to deal with key sites of power that we find in our society, and that would speak to areas of culture, media, politics, and the economy. In conclusion, what was also resounding from the commission was that building the organs of people's power must be coupled with a particular ideological route, which is this struggle for socialism, meaning building organs of people's power must find ground in us fighting for the ownership of the means of production, without which building organs of people's power would just be null and void. Thanks.
Perhaps from the beginning, even before we read the declaration of this extremely important conference, the drafters wish to place on record, and it is a statement found in the declaration as well, the appreciation by conference its gratitude to the South African Communist Party and the Swedish Left Party for facilitating and hosting this historic conference. We thought that we should place that on record right from the outset. Perhaps also, let me state that there will be a report which will capture especially all the outputs from the commissions. So in the event that you feel at the end of the declaration that it may not have reflected very strongly some of the sentiment that was expressed in the commissions, please note that when the report is written of this conference, all the key elements that will have been discussed, especially the ones that will have gone into the commissions and the written inputs, will be properly and accurately reflected. Here then, comrades, is the declaration for this conference. As comrades and compatriots gathered in Johannesburg, South Africa, in August 14th to the 16th of the year 2008, from all parts of the world, at the Africa Conference on Participatory Democracy, hosted by the South African Communist Party and the Swedish Labour Left Party, under the auspices of the International Left Forum, declare the following. 1. The African continent has been and continues to be ravaged by effects of colonialism, imperialism. It is devastated by curable diseases, among them HIV and AIDS, TB, malaria. It is underdeveloped. It suffers from abject poverty and squalor. Living conditions affect the majority of its inhabitants amidst great wealth. That the African continent is a repository of rich minerals, gold, diamonds, coal, platinum, plants, water, oxygen resources, and others. 2, the capitalist system and imperialist forces continue to plunder these riches at the expense of the majority, while enriching a small capitalist class and some corrupt African leaders chosen to defeat substantive democracy and to perpetuate a neoliberal democratic outlook that promises rights without substance. 3, our revolutionary support and commitment to the total liberation of the African people, to humanity as a whole, the working class, rural communities and peasants, free from exploitation, capitalist slavery, and the commodification of human life, remains unwavering. 4, conference called on progressive forces throughout the continent and the world to remain combat ready and immersed as the vanguard of everyday battles of the working class, to free the world from imperialism, neocolonialism, and all its remnants and vestiges. 5, our passion to destroy capitalism, wherever it may be, to free society from crass materialism and consumerism, and to advance to a society that is democratic, cooperative, and communal, remains unwavering. 6, conference committed to struggle and fight for socialism, which is the only viable alternative and solution to the neo-colonial and capitalist crisis, which puts human needs before greed. 7, conference agreed that socialism is the future and we must build it now. 8, our unwavering solidarity among the progressive forces of the left to join hands and strengthen organizational capacity to build a world solidarity movement which will be more organized and structured, assertive, and militant, remains unwavering. We pledge our solidarity with the left formations that continue to operate under dangerous conditions of irregularity, such as in Egypt, Sudan, Cameroon, among others. We pledge our solidarity and continued focus on hotspots around the world that are currently under extreme violent capitalist oppression and in urgent need of relief and basic democratic rights. In particular, we pledge our solidarity and support and commitment to the struggles of the peoples of Western Sahara, those in Darfur, in Palestine, in Swaziland, in Zimbabwe, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Cuba, Burma, and the rest of the world. We pledge our commitment to the struggle for the total emancipation of women from patriarchy, religious bigotry, capitalism, racial and tribal oppression. Conference condemns in the strongest possible terms the raping of women and girls and all other forms of violence. We condemn in the strongest terms the practice of child labor and child soldiers. We regard this as an abominable true face of capitalism. We resolve to contribute to speeding up the resolution of the land question, in particular in Africa, where our people remain landless, homeless, and enslaved. We declare that trade unions are potentially an important component in the struggle for socialism. We pledge to work to build progressive trade unions. We commit to work with progressive forces amongst the working class, women organizations, religious, youth, children, the elderly, and so on, to end the crisis of capitalism. We commit ourselves to build organizational capacity and leadership to promote popular participatory democracy. We pledge our solidarity with the people of Latin America who are struggling to build an alternative society to the barbarism of capitalism. That in all the above struggles, intentions and plans of action, participatory democracy must not and cannot and will not be sacrificed for undemocratic, dogmatic, and authoritarian practices, which so often destroy our best intentions. We, the participants of the African Conference on Participatory Democracy, declare unashamedly and proudly and with the greatest passion that history is not complete until capitalism and all its vestiges come to a shameful end and the road of the human race is lit with love for one another and with socialism. Conference expressed its gratitude to South African Communist Party and the Swedish Left Party for facilitating and hosting this historic conference on the African continent. And finally, conference also received and acknowledged messages of support from communists, workers, and other activists from all over the world, for which conference is very grateful. I thank you.
You must understand at least the following. You must get a history of the CPL within the context of what we shall present. You must also be given a broader picture of what is happening in Lesotho, and of course the challenges facing us as the CPL. We'll begin with a little bit of Lesotho's political economy. We are saying we have been created to be a labor reserve economy by the British colonialists, and we still remain that labor reserve economy even today. This explains why political instability is never ending in Lesotho. We did not want just to be general. We said at least if there are diamonds in Lesotho that have been mined, although on a very limited scale, and they are creating problems for us. Water is also being tapped and exported to South Africa. Our population was 2 million in the last census, and even in the new census, We are told we are still 2 million. Why? Because most of the Basotho have shifted to South Africa illegally and legally. And women of the childbearing age are refusing to manufacture children because the wages that are given to workers are very, very low. So they don't have money to pay those who will be looking after their children when they go to work. This is we feel, briefly, this is the political economy of Lesotho. Now, coming to the political parties, we felt, and we have always said, one cannot define the emergence of political parties in Lesotho in exclusion of the South African history. During the British colonial period in the 1920s, we had the Khotla for the Commoners League, which of course was linked to the SACP, and the commoners were feeling marginalized by the British, not being included in the structures. Those structures that were set up by the British only included chiefs and the royal family, so the commoners were protesting. We also had the Basotho and the Professionals Association in the 1920s. Those were professionals who were just seeking accommodation within the British system. But however, when one looks at the period 1952 to 1984, parties that have emerged as a result of influence of the South African politics. The ANC formed the BCP, which was known as the BAC in 1952. The Nationalist Party, which was then governing, formed with the Catholic Church of Lesotho, the Basotho National Party. Then there was another royalist party, the Marematlou Freedom Party, that also emerged because of lack of internal democracy from the main parties in Lesotho. But they became royalists. And I laughed when Minister GF last night asked me, how is the Marematlou Freedom Party? I said, oh, by the way, the ANC, of course, tried to work with this royalist party at some stage. Then the CPL emerged through the initiative of the SACP in 1962. Baba Mjali, I know, Joe Matthews and others were very instrumental in the formation of the CPL. So we only had democratic elections in Lesotho in 1965, which were won by the BNP, winning it on the anti-communist ticket and anti-national liberation movements. In the 1970 second multi-party democracy, the BNP lost the elections. It refused to relinquish power through the initiative of Prime Minister Vorster in South Africa. And as a result, we communists were banned, others were repressed, others were just being beaten, and they fled to Botswana and many other places. And then from 1970 until 1986, we've had civilian dictatorship of the BNP. From 1986 until 1991, we've had military dictatorship. But we were fortunate, and South Africa as well, in 1974 when Chris came. When he first came to Lesotho, the links between the SACP and CPL through him were tightened. There was a joint partnership, I still remember, where the youth became the main target through an organization which was called the Committee for Action and Solidarity for Southern African Students. It recruited students from Kenya, Rwanda, Swaziland, Lesotho, South Africa, Namibia. I know Chris used to tell those from Namibia to join SWAPO, those from Zimbabwe to join the Zimbabwe African People's Union, those from Lesotho to join the CPL, those from Swaziland, they were told to form a communist-oriented party, and those from Kenya and Rwanda. But however, because of our struggle, because the South African struggle now was heating up, basically Lesotho being the effective base, Chris was declared persona non grata. Some also from Kenya were deported, and Swaziland, the students. Of course, we from the CPL were severely beaten. But however, the struggle went on. Through the initiative of the party, though banned, where the BNP government, which of course supported the ANC from 1977 to 1986, for 8 years, was toppled. Everything was closed. The coup was engineered from South Africa. But as the party, we did not give up. I remember the 1986 underground conference in Maseru, which we convened to evaluate the coup and chart a way forward. I remember one of the resolutions of the party, which I still remember even today, was all communists to the front. We said we're going to resist the Pretoria-inspired military regime. We said, despite the imperialists attempting to dismantle the political and the military infrastructure in the suit of the MK, we are going to maintain it. And in that resolution it was said, whether elite or anybody who has a wagon, it must be availed for MK. So there are still remnants if you go to Lesotho at the police headquarters. But however, we also pushed for democratization in 1990. It was through the effort of the CPL that there was a palace coup in the military. And then democracy came up. But now, democratization brought another problem for us of instability. The electoral model. We used first past the post from 1965 to 1998. We only had one party democracy, only one party. The elections were always revenge in nature. That the BNP has been repressing, therefore people should not vote for it. But however, as communists, we pushed for an inclusive electoral model. When SADC intervened in 1998 during the crisis, we said, but we should shift to mixed member parliament. When we sold this idea to the right wing, to everybody, it was accepted. So we have an MMP electoral model which started operating in 2002. Of course, by 2002, when we went to test our strength in the electoral box, we found that we had 7,000 voters. In 2007, we were voted by 17,000. So our numbers keep on trickling. But now, what are the challenges facing us? We have had a resolution that said South Africa and Lesotho should come together. This was a resolution of the CPL. Of course, we were assisted by the SACP. Hence why Chris Hani had to smuggle some of our comrades to draft the 1991 NUM resolution that said the two countries must be brought together. Although NUM has run away, we have not run away. This is the resolution that has brought us 17,000 votes. And we had planned a red October this year, a very massive one, because during the election period, we were marching to the borders, petitioning the South African government and the Lesotho government that the two countries should come together. This is the program that brought us 17,000 voters. But however, a memorandum of understanding has been signed between these two countries, which is beginning to gather dust like the Joint Bilateral Commission. We felt that on October 17, Comrade General Secretary, Maseru should be raided, petitioning the two governments. So that is the social struggle for us, because we are a labor-reserved economy, but survival for us and stability for South Africa is when the two come together. And we leave this to the South African Communist Party to find out from Parliament, because the two parliaments are not discussing the memorandum of understanding that was signed on the 19th of June 2008 that there will be free movement between these two countries. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the CPL. open type of an alliance, and from time to time, any topical issue is not constrained because of a particular memorandum of understanding. Any other can raise an issue of fundamental nature, engage debate, and then go on and then really express our opinions without fear that we are undermining a particular memorandum of understanding. But deep in that particular revolution that went for 70 years, the understanding that came out of such debates is that the ANC maximum program, it's in the what we call the National Democratic Revolution, which is more of ending apartheid and its legacies, the national oppression as was the case, and building a new non-racial society, non-sexist and democratic, which all of us, together with the party and COSATU, we are all subscribed to that particular National Democratic Revolution. And then, but for the Communist Party, that is a minimum program, whereas for the ANC, it's a maximum program. And then, but Communist Party says, we'll then take advantage of that building of that new society and advance towards a socialist society. And the ANC is understanding that at that particular moment, when in the history of the development and growth of our society, it happens when the working class is fully conscious of its role in society and in history, it will then obviously take over the leadership and advance on the gains of that National Democratic Revolution and indeed build for that social. And the ANC will not be an obstacle at that particular point in time. And I think that's how then we understand it to be. And from time to time, obviously, the balance of forces get articulated every 5 years when the ANC meets, when the Communist Party meets in their own congresses, about the concrete conditions in terms of where we are, the balance of forces. And obviously, in that we are reading in terms of the forward movement and the setbacks that are there. Not that there are no setbacks, there will always be setbacks in any revolution. And then we're able then to say, how don't we begin to engage on those setbacks and advance? Now for the ANC, it has then decided that to affiliate to a group called the Socialist International. It's a Socialist International knowingly that it has rejected Marxism theory as the basis of its analysis, completely rejected it and went out. And by the ANC,
can you hear me? Hello? Steve? Steve, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Je m'écoute? Ça va?
That belongs to the left forces. We are progressive, but we know that some within the Socialist International are not for Marxism. So we are in there, and in it you get communists, because the Communist Party of China is there, Cuban Communist Party is just coming in now as an observer. We have socialist organizations, we have social democrats, you have left parties, a few of them here and there. You have former liberation movements, and we also have what you call progressive forces. So that is the combination of forces, and the balance within the Socialist International, obviously depending on the majority of whatever grouping within, and from time to time. So we were part of that particular body. And then for Africa and also for the world, we realize that Socialist International does not give us that particular platform for the articulation of the left politics in the main. And we have agreed in the ANC, the Polokwane conference last year, to then convene or prepare or be part of the organizations that can convene a meeting of all progressive forces in Africa and also in the world. So we'll start with Africa, obviously, as a continent, and then we'll move on to the world. Knowingly that some of them are within the Socialist International, we'll identify those that are more closer to us. Some are outside of it, we'll also converge with them and then build this type of a progressive forces movement. And when we say movement, it will not be political parties alone, because within the civil society, there are those organizations like the trade union movements, other civil society organizations that also are belonging to this particular progressive family, that we could then begin to develop that type of a forum and a network. I'll therefore be more inclined to agree with the speaker from Kenya that the type of network we build therefore has to be more socialist, Marxist, Leninist orientated, so that you become the vanguard should you participate in the other broader progressive movement, both at your country level, but also outside of the continent, in your region and also in the continent, so that the theoretical aspect of the socialists and communists can then become to be the vanguard of those that are seen to be progressive, and indeed take a move with them, because we had agreed that we'll want to take any democratic space that gets opened by such organizations as former liberation movements and any other democratic forces that may not ideologically be socialist or communist, but however the space that they open and the relationship that will be developing, that space is needed, but then the vanguardism will also be needed, where the theory aspect continuously is deepened within those particular forces, so that they don't get hijacked, obviously, in the process by the liberals and the neoliberal type of organizations. I think that will be my contribution, and so that we take it in that context. And I think I was also responding to what Comrade Blade was saying, should we broaden up or narrow or do what? And I think I'll go for the narrowing aspect of it, so that we leave the other for the broader movement, but you come in, be part of that broader movement, and then really bring the theory aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
In the ancient history of Darfur, the existing region has been characterized by waves of migrations due to the movements of Arab and African tribes. These waves of migrations have significantly influenced the shaping of Darfur history, as well as its norms, traditions, customs. Clearly, migrants have brought with them cultural, social, economic, and religious currents, some of which have made radical changes in Darfur, and due to Darfur's natural and climatic diversity, a number of tribes had settled in different parts of the area. Each tribe has its own chief, assuming the management of its affairs independent of any other authority. The tribal customs were the term of reference that had governed the relations between the different tribes in Darfur. Indeed, Darfur had been known to the world since the ancient history. It has been mentioned that some pharaohs had once visited the area, while the Romans had made attempts to subjugate Darfur in order to exploit its resources. Admittedly, the 40 days road, that's the duration of the journey from Darfur to the southern part of Egypt. It took 40 days at that time. The 40 days road linked Darfur to the Egyptian province of Asyut. Moreover, a number of nations and explorers from across the world had visited Darfur, as it had been one of the most important commercial stopping places in the African continent. As an independent entity, Darfur had been ruled by different kingdoms and sultanates, usually named after the dominant tribe, such as the Dajo tribe, the sultanate in the 12th and 16th century, and the Tunjur Sultanate between the end of the 16th century and the first half of the 15th century. In 1445, Sultan Suleiman Surun of the Turkish Empire, of Darfur, established the Islamic State in Darfur, which lasted as an independent sultanate until 1874, when it was conquered by the Turco-Egyptian colonizers following their invasion of Sudan in 1821. Under the new rule, Darfur became part of Sudan up until the Mahdiya era. That's the Mahdist revolution. However, following the collapse of the Mahdiya, after its armies were defeated while resisting the British invasion in the Battle of Karari in 1899, Darfur once again became an independent entity with external representations, besides being a member of the League of Nations until 1922. Yet, due to the support given by the Sultan Ali Dinar to Turkey in its struggle against the Allies during the First World War, Britain invaded Darfur and subjugated it to become yet again part of Sudan in 1960. The area of Darfur is approximately 500,000 square kilometers. It is the size of Iraq or the state of California in the United States. Also, its size is equivalent to that of France, Poland, Portugal combined. At the same time, at the time of the independence of Sudan in 1956, Darfur used to be governed as a single administrative unit, province, known as Darfur Province. However, following its seizure of power in the 30th of June 1989, the National Islamic Front regime divided Darfur into 3 states: state of North Darfur, state of South Darfur, and the state of West Darfur. Al-Fashir, that's the capital of Darfur, Niala, the capital of South Darfur, and Al-Geneina, capital of West Darfur, are the largest towns in Darfur, besides Zalinji, Deir, Guram, etc. Darfur has a vast border open to Libya, Chad, and Central African Republic. Tribal interactions across such vast borders made Darfur exposed to existing and renewed conflicts in the region. And by the way, any defeated ruler of Chad comes to Sudan and settles in Darfur. And from Darfur, he reorganizes his forces and takes N'Djamena, that's the capital of Chad. That's the practice up to now. Victorious in these conflicts often advance from Darfur, while the defeated retreat to Darfur to regroup for a new attack. Moreover, Darfur shoulders the burden of the fluctuations which are of Arab origin, while others are of African origin. African tribes include Al-Fur, Al-Sahawa, Al-Masalid, Al-Barti, Al-Dama, Al-Falata, etc. While Arab tribes include Al-Rizigat, Al-Daisha, Al-Abaniya, Al-Bani Alba, Al-Misiriya, Al-Maania, Al-Salamat, etc. The origin of such name of Darfur can be traced back to the African tribe of Al-Fur, which is the largest and the most famous in the region. The word Darfur means the home of the four. All Darfurians are Muslims, and they speak different local languages and dialects besides Arabic language. Due to the nature of its problems and its racial and cultural diversity, Darfur is considered as a mini Africa. Darfur is renowned for being the biggest producer and exporter of Arabic, and also cattle and herds. Also, it is renowned for its substantial animal wealth. Some studies indicate that a huge wealth of oil and other minerals such as uranium exist in Darfur. The roots of the present conflict in Darfur is decades older than the date of its recognition by the media and the international community. It is considered as one of the manifestations of the Sudanese crisis, which started on joint with independence and continues until now. According to our perception in the Communist Party of Sudan, the main direct causes of this conflict can be grouped under the following 2 categories. First, the historical roots of the conflict, and the second, the role which was played by the different consecutive political regimes that governed the Sudan, and which eventually resulted in the escalation of the crisis till it was transformed into an international humanitarian tragedy, largely due to the atrocities committed by the Islamic Front regime, which took over power in Sudan in June 30th, 1989. Historical roots of the conflict. This conflict has a traditional tribal nature, resulting from the dependence of these tribes on deteriorating natural resources and the use of these resources by both nomads and farmers. And in these terms, the conflict is as old as the existence of these tribes and their coexistence together. It was clear that the 4 tribes did not lack awareness and wisdom to face and solve these conflicts. During the period 1957 until today, more than 20 tribal conferences have been convened in Darfur. These conferences have summarized the main points of the problem in the following: A, respect of the historical rights of these tribes regarding their hawakir. Hawakir is what you encircle or you limit as your land or your home or your area of pasture. And hakura in a way could be translated into a monopoly, that this is mine, you cannot trespass on it. Also, these congresses formulated agreements on determination of the routes of the movement of these tribes. Some routes are western to Jabal Marra, that's the main mountain, which occupies a large area, and it's so high that you start from the tropical, the semi-tropical, till you come to the Mediterranean climate and the upper heights, with citrus fruit and other vegetations that are part of the Mediterranean climate vegetation. So, the participants in these conferences always came out with sound and practical recommendations. But these recommendations remain only on paper without implementation by either the central or the local authorities. They are respected and carried out by the tribes. The government always is to the way. And as usual, under the present regime, that is the regime of the Islamic Front,